Bipartisan concerns. Hundreds of members of Congress send the president a letter about nuclear talks with Iran. Claiming responsibility. As the death toll rises, ISIS says it's behind the Tunisia museum attack. All wet. A sprinkler system that soaked the homeless is removed from cathedral doorways in San Francisco.
We're feasting in the midst of the Lenten fast.
I'm Jason Calvi. I'll tell you why coming up next.
Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 19th, 2015. Good evening on this Solemnity of St. Joseph. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. New details tonight in the ongoing nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran. A draft of a deal commits Iran to reducing its enrichment of uranium. In return, Iran gets relief from economic sanctions and a partial lifting of a UN embargo on conventional arms. Also today, bipartisan concerns about the talks are sent from Congress to the White House. Susanne LaFrankie reports from Capitol Hill tonight.
Members of Congress still insist they have their own say in the deal. They wrote their own letter to President Obama where they are calling for, quote, verifiable constraints, ones that will last for decades. The letter is supported by 360 members of Congress, a majority of each party.
It's truly a very bipartisan letter expressing Congress's strong feelings about things that need to be in the agreement.
The letter, like the one sent to Tehran's leaders by Senate Republicans, reminds the administration that permanent sanctions relief would require congressional action and will only be considered if Congress is convinced there is no pathway to a bomb.
We're trying to prevent them from getting nuclear weapons, which I think at the end of the day, if this agreement is signed and delivered, they will get them eventually.
Negotiations between Iran and 6 world powers on Tehran's nuclear program continue in Switzerland today.
We are making progress, but there are issues that need to be resolved.
The U.S. says while the talks are progressing, both sides remain skeptical.
We do need to see political will, and we need to see that on the Iranian side. This is the time for them to back up what they've said publicly with verifiable steps.
The most prominent opponent of a nuclear deal with Iran got a boost this week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu won his 4th re-election. Netanyahu has been critical of any deal with Iran. Meanwhile, the White House promises to veto any congressional action before the negotiations are finished.
What the United States and our international partners seek from these negotiations are very specific commitments from the Iranians to come into compliance with international expectations about their nuclear program.
There is now bipartisan support for congressional action against Iran in the Senate. Republican Bob Corker and Democrat Robert Menendez say they plan to introduce legislation sometime next week. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie at the Capitol, thank you. In what sounds like a contradiction, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he still believes in a Palestinian state. Netanyahu told MSNBC he is still committed to a 2-state solution if conditions improve. In the closing days of his campaign, the Israeli leader said there would be no Palestinian state while he's prime minister. The White House accuses him of cynical election politics. The administration says it is reevaluating its approach to securing peace in the Middle East. The new Secret Service director once again on the hot seat today. Senators grilled Joseph Clancy about an incident 2 weeks ago. 2 agents allegedly crashed into a security barrier at an investigation scene near the White House. 2 days ago, Clancy answered to a House committee about the same incident. He said today descriptions of the crash have been overblown.
Previous reports of a crash are inaccurate. There was no crash. The video shows a vehicle entering the White House complex at a speed of approximately 1 to 2 miles per hour and pushing aside a plastic barrel. There was no damage to the vehicle.
Clancy promised to show senators video of the incident, but said it would not be released to the public. President Obama orders the federal government to green up its act. He's directing agencies to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40% over 10 years. Federal agencies are also expected to increase their use of renewable energy. The president spoke at the Environmental Protection Agency, which is equipped with solar panels. He also met with CEOs of the government's top suppliers, urging them to enforce similar measures. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall visit the White House today. The royal couple is wrapping up a 3-day visit to Washington. Charles and Camilla toured cultural and educational sites here in our nation's capital. Prince Charles has now visited the United States 20 times. The Senate remains deadlocked on a bill to help victims of human trafficking. Objecting to language restricting federal funding for abortions, Democrats block a vote for a third time. Republicans have tied passage of the bill to a vote on Attorney General nominee Loretta Lynch. That's prompting one leading Democrat to accuse Republicans of racial politics.
And so, Loretta Lynch, the first African-American woman nominated to be Attorney General, is asked to sit in the back of the bus when it comes to the Senate calendar.
Republicans are furious about Durbin's comments. They insist Lynch's race has nothing to do with this situation. President Obama nominated Lynch in November to replace Eric Holder, who's resigning. And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. ISIS claims responsibility for the attack on a Tunisian museum that killed 23 people Wednesday. Tunisian authorities arrested 9 people today in connection with the attack. The victims include 18 foreign tourists, mostly European. Statements by ISIS call the museum a den of infidels and vice. The terrorist group also promises more attacks. Russia celebrates a controversial anniversary. 1 year ago, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula, which had been part of Ukraine. The anniversary was cause for a party last night in Moscow. This is what happens when Russia celebrates its latest territorial gain. Tens of thousands turn out. Millions more watch on state television as President Putin congratulates the nation a year since annexing Crimea.
We understand that it is not about the territory which we have enough of. It is about historical roots of our spirituality and statehood. It is about what makes us a nation and a united, unified nation.
The seizure last year was a virtual covert operation. For weeks, the Kremlin denied Russian soldiers were even involved. A Crimean referendum was quickly organized, and the strategic peninsula became a small but important addition to the world's largest country. A year on, there are international sanctions on Moscow and condemnation by the West, but Russians seem convinced about where Crimea belongs. Opinion polls in Russia show most Russians support the decision to annex Crimea. A tiny minority believes it would be justified to consider returning Crimea to Ukraine. The Archdiocese of San Francisco plays defense again tonight. Critics say a sprinkler system was drenching homeless people who were taking shelter outside the cathedral. In response, the Cathedral of St. Mary's has now removed the water system. It was installed 2 years earlier to wash away needles and other waste harmful to people walking by. When homeless people were seen getting soaked by the sprinklers, it caught the attention of the local media. The cathedral rector says the archdiocese supports the homeless and didn't expect the water system to cause problems.
It actually has had an opposite effect from what it was intended to do. And for that, we are very sorry and apologize.
The Archdiocese of San Francisco is one of the largest supporters of services for the homeless in the city. Matthew Schmitz is deputy editor of First Things. He's been following this story out in San Francisco. Matthew, the Archdiocese is catching criticism for installing a water spigot at the back doors of the cathedral. Apparently the homeless are getting soaked. Now, Archbishop Cordileone is being painted as an enemy of the homeless. What's the real story there?
Well, Archbishop Cordileone has, as Archbishop of San Francisco, a long record of working. He's gone to soup kitchens to feed the homeless, to meet with them. He's went to, parish in the Castro district in San Francisco to help the homeless there. And also, in being the head of the church in San Francisco, he's been responsible for a lot of the initiatives the church has done to help feed and house the homeless. So it's worth realizing that he may not have known very much about the sprinkler system at the cathedral, which is administered by another bishop who's there at the cathedral. And he's also done a great deal in other ways to help the homeless. We should keep that in mind.
And that system's been in there for a couple of years. Why do you think it's getting so much attention right now?
Well, it's interesting to see this story crop up at the moment. Right now, Cordileone is in the middle of a pretty heated battle over his new requirements for teachers in Catholic high schools in San Francisco to not publicly contradict church teaching. And a man named Sam Singer, who's a very famous PR man who has worked for Chevron and other corporations, he's been hired to oppose the Archbishop over this. And this is a PR guy. He's good at his job, and he's famous for kind of a no-holds-barred, all-out attack on his enemies. And we don't know for sure if this comes from him, from someone else, but it certainly would be in keeping with his tactics previously.
And finally, the Archdiocese says those sprinklers are being removed. They'll be taken out. They said they probably made some poor judgments in doing that. Will this extinguish the controversy, do you think?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we'll probably, new accusations. It's important, as Christians, that we always do everything we can to, make sure that there's nothing that can impugn our witness. But, it's worth remembering that some of the people who criticized the Archbishop, city officials in San Francisco, they've also taken steps to try to keep the homeless, away from public spaces that they're running. And it's probably a good moment for everyone to ask, what can we do to better feed the homeless? Make this not just about kind of condemning, the Archbishop, which might be unfair, but, asking what we can all do to better house and feed those in need.
Matthew Schmitz joining us by Skype from New York with First Things. Thanks so much for being with us, Matthew.
Thank you.
Today we celebrate the Solemnity of St. Joseph, patron of the Universal Church and patron of families. For almost 2 years now, his name has been heard at every Mass. Wyatt Goolsby has more.
With Blessed Joseph, her spouse.
It's a part of the Mass many people may not even notice, but the mention of Joseph in all the Eucharistic prayers gives Father John Filippelli a reason to smile.
We were so happy.
Filippelli is a Josephite, a religious order devoted to St. Joseph, and the first group to serve African-American seminarians in the U.S. For decades, Filippelli wrote about and supported a push to put Joseph into the Mass.
When people really respond to Joseph, pay attention to him and his life, the person that he was, the Church benefits from that.
During the Second Vatican Council, Pope John XXIII inserted the name Joseph in the first Eucharistic prayer. As 3 new Eucharistic prayers were added, they did not include Joseph's name. John XXIII's personal devotion to Joseph was complemented by Pope John Paul II, who wrote at length about Joseph's role in the life of the Church. But it wasn't until Pope Francis' decree in the summer of 2013 that Joseph was put in every Eucharistic prayer.
In the Gospel, St. Joseph appears as a strong and courageous man, a working man, yet in his heart we see great tenderness, which is not the virtue of the weak, but rather a sign of strength of spirit and a capacity for concern.
He always had kind of a silent role, and apparently St. Joseph was content with that. Kind of being the central focus being Christ himself.
Bishop John Ricard, rector of the Josephite Seminary, says Francis' addition is a step in the right direction and hopes all Christians will take the time to learn more about the life of St. Joseph.
Family life is very important, especially when you hear today the many stressors on family life. And St. Joseph, I think, represents someone who out of his way goes and protects Mary and his foster son, Jesus Christ, in so many ways.
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsby, for reporting that great story on the Solemnity of St. Joseph, which, by the way, reminds us that this is the day 2 years ago that Pope Francis was inaugurated at the inaugural Mass on St. Joseph. Some of the Josephites hope Pope Francis will declare a year of St. Joseph. If that happens, it would likely follow the Jubilee Year of Mercy, which begins December 8th of this year. Coming up, we give you a sneak peek of a sweet treat made especially for this Solemnity of St. Joseph. On Thursday, March 19th, thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Dr. Chiara Giaccardi joining us from the Salesian Pontifical University in Rome. The Salesians there celebrating the 200th anniversary of the birth of St. John Bosco. How important is education to the Salesians?
Don Bosco was one of the most important priests in Italy who care about the young and their education, and staying with them, listening to them, caring about their desire and their capabilities was one of his first and most important goals in his educational practice. So it's education, I think, is the crucial word to Salesian mission.
Don Bosco would jump in with the kids. He would play ball with them. He would do magic tricks. Certainly, if he were alive today, he probably would be doing social media. How do you think he would be using digital media in his ministry?
I think he will try to involve young people in using this space for for authentic relationship. And I think he will involve teachers and students and pupils in a relation of reciprocity, trying to reconnect teaching and learning, because maybe in our culture, education became like a broadcasting activity where teachers are sending messages to pupils. And young people can help the adults to make the most of the new environment and to share and to be involved in a reciprocal relationship of learning and teaching. And this is a very good opportunity, I think.
It is indeed a new world with many great opportunities. Dr. Chiara Giaccardi joining us from Rome. Thank you so much for sharing your insight.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And again, happy Feast of St. Joseph. It's a solemnity, one of the Church's highest feasts. Now that means we take a break from our Lenten penance and sacrifice and celebrate as church. For the party, Jason Calvi dishes out a sweet Italian tradition.
You can only grab these sweets once a year, a tradition almost 60 years in the baking. Nick Vaccaro is doing his father's work.
It's something that I want to do because I feel that I'm obligated to do, because if I stopped it, it would end.
Mixing an old world recipe.
It's mostly an egg batter.
Passed down by a Sicilian grandmother.
That helps them keep a round shape.
For Timothy Quick and most of the employees here, working at Vaccaro's is tradition.
I watched my grandmother do this and then I started doing it.
What are these things called, by the way?
Sfingi. Sfingi the San Giuseppe. Sfingi. My father made it, I make it. Okay?
Nick's father, Gioacchino, grew up in Palermo, Sicily. He started selling Italian pastries in Baltimore almost 60 years ago. Vaccaro's used to fry up double what they do now, 1,400 Sfingi. Nick says sales are down each year as less people keep up with the tradition.
It's sad only because I know eventually it'll end.
So Nick is keeping the tradition cooking by stuffing the pastries with chocolate chips and cannoli cream.
Bless us, O Lord.
Dominican Father Hugh Vincent Dyer encourages the faithful to pick up a St. Joseph pastry.
We should grab a hold of these traditions that many cultures have brought with them, many Catholic cultures, and to enter into the celebration of the friends of Christ who are the saints. But St. Joseph in particular has a very special place, you know, as the guardian of the Redeemer.
A sweet bite of tradition on this feast.
When we go to celebrate the goodness of the Lord to us, we think of sugar. We think of that sweetness, that milk and that honey of the promised land.
Happy Feast in Baltimore. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
That is so awesome.
Up next, a little boy tries to end World War II so he can bring his daddy home. We look at the role of faith in this new film. And March Madness gets a second look from business management as a team-building tool to boost office morale. We appreciate you being with us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, a 7-year-old boy is willing to do anything to end World War II and bring his father home. The Catholic director and screenwriter of the new film Little Boy recently visited us. That conversation's just ahead, but first a quick preview of the movie coming out next month.
Faith is powerful.
But if I get enough faith, nothing's impossible, right? Even bringing my dad home?
Your faith won't work if you have even the slightest bit of doubt.
Little Boy, set in the 1940s, features Eduardo Verostegui and Ali Landry from Bella. Touched by an Angel's Roma Downey and her husband Mark Burnett are co-producers. Alejandro Monteverde is a film director. You remember Bella. It took first prize at the Toronto International Film Festival. Alejandro, your new movie is called Little Boy. It's coming out in April, and faith and fatherhood are themes. Is that personal to you?
Yes, yes. You know, I'm being blessed with the best father. My dad, my relation, I will do anything for my father. So that's pretty much the heart of the film. It's about a son that is willing to believe in the impossible, to do whatever it takes to bring his father back from World War II. And you need the innocence of a child to believe that everything is possible.
You have 3 of your own children. Do you see that innocence in them?
Yes, and it's, you know, it's like one of the biggest blessings to come home and to be welcomed. It's almost like an injection of
Daddy.
Love, yeah.
So the early conversations when you were putting this concept together, you worked closely with Mark Burnett, Roma Downey, other fellow Christians. What were some of those early conversations about?
Well, I showed him the film, and we decided to kind of join forces to take this dream into the big screen. And you know, Mark and Roma have been nothing but a blessing to this whole project and the journey.
From the trailer, it looks like a family film, yet it's about war. What is the message about war that you're trying from it?
Well, you know, war, in many ways, most of the films, or most of when we talk about war, we think about the people on the battlefield. And this movie explores a little bit more how it affects the families. And the movie, it's really about the home front, about the ones left behind, about the wives and the children, and all this battle that is going on for the loved ones that are in the battlefield. So it explores the love of the son, little boy, who it's willing to do whatever it takes to bring his father back from World War II. So you have, you know, the smallest kid in town trying to, in a way, end the greatest war of our times, which is World War II.
It was a huge war, and it affected so many. We talk about the numbers of people who died or remained in that war, and yet when you bring in the families to that, that just completely opens it up. So it is a family movie.
It is a family movie. It's a movie for everybody, but you know, it's a movie that will, you know, that explores a lot of different themes. One being war, but also the theme about how to handle pain in a moment of tragedy. How do we use our faith? And it explores from a very objective point of view. You know, I don't like to impose a theme, I like to propose a theme. So we explore, you know, the power of faith through the eyes of a little boy.
Well, we loved Bella, and I cannot wait to see Little Boy. It's released in late April. Alejandro Monteverde, director of the new film Little Boy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
The best of everything with the new movie.
Thank you very much.
All right, of course, that was some time ago. I didn't change real quick. March Madness is back. Many fans will do whatever it takes to catch the NCAA basketball tournament day games, even if they're at work. But rather than treating it as a distraction, some companies now embrace the tournament in the workplace. That is a change in thinking from traditional management, concerned about a drop-off in productivity as people watch the games. Some managers now use March Madness to bring workers together and to boost staff morale. Experts say employees who feel connected will work harder with better results and stay with the company longer. We appreciate you being with us tonight. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick, and we leave you sharing a very special blessing. Our chaplain, Father Patrick, leads a Eucharistic procession through our EWTN Capitol Hill News Center on this, the Feast of St. Joseph. Good night and God bless you.